Okay, so I'm gonna say some stuff you might not like.
A lot of people who express hesitation to want to vote for Kamala Harris, they're doing so because they don't care if Donald Trump gets elected. It's not really a I don't support Vice President Harris thing so much as centrism, as enablement for the rise of the right.
Again, as a Kamala Harris supporter, I find her comments deeply silly, but that doesn't really matter. I can understand people are actually mad at somebody rather than them trying to stir up fake outrage because they're in some Stan Twitter war.
Because Chappell Roan wants to stand on business, because she wants to stay consistent, she gets attacked for somehow abandoning queer people or something, even though she explicitly said she wanted more attention brought to trans rights. Somehow, in the liberal mind, that means she's an embarrassment to lesbians.
Yeah. Chappell Roan is not the name of one of Trump's golf courses. She's actually a great new recording artist who, like a Hezbollah pager, is really blowing up.
Trust.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense, dude. Like, endorsement is different than, like, going out and voting for someone anyway. But beyond that, like, if you want someone's vote or their endorsement, you have to earn it. This is the basis of democracy.
Chappell Roan is the project name of a modern pop outfit with some compositional and sound aesthetic help from Dan Nigro. She's been active for about a decade and did all of the things that you're supposed to do to grow and promote your work. Working her way up through certain scenes, releasing powerful, focused, and infectious singles, and doing the supporting tour grind. Due to her collaborators' connects, she was able to score a supporting role on a few Olivia Rodrigo tours, followed by an impressive TV performance and a visually striking Tiny Desk. And that launched her across so many algorithms that spotlighted her queer sapphic celebration in a refreshing and authentic way. I personally came in contact with her through the popular song Good Luck Babe, which sparked some, I want to say, online queer discourse. I say that as a proud they-them that lived through the 1900s. But the song inspired basically two combos. First of which being what we would call compulsory heterosexuality, usually called comp het, which refers to how sexuality is assumed early in a woman's life and enforced upon them by a patriarchal and heteronormative society. In other words, everything else outside of heterosexuality is imbued to be unnatural, therefore demoting queerness as a quote-unquote choice. Women are conditioned to believe their desirability to the patriarchal standards of society is their highest asset. Meanwhile, chapters of a beautifully lived gay life are cut short for many who come out late. Originally coined by lesbian feminist Adrienne Rich in the 1980s, this term has been theoretically complicated or built upon due to our expansive understanding of gender and queer relationships as the discourse has evolved. All this to say that the song details a close and occasionally romantic relationship between two femmes, Chappell Roan and an unnamed woman, the subject of the song, who denies her attraction to Chappell and women in general. And instead of taking the chance to bask in the fullness of a queer relationship, she chooses to settle for a heterosexual one. The song itself, I feel, is cathartic because it offers a loose fantasy of closure so many young queer folks experience in a way that gives them agency. So I feel like a common story with the nerds, the freaks, the geeks, and the outcast is having a close friendship with someone. And if you're straight, occasionally this is a person of the opposite sex. This person becomes a large part of your life, someone to confide in, share joy, thoughts, and generally experience things with. And sometimes you form romantic feelings for this person. And it can be common that the person that you have these romantic feelings for don't necessarily share mutual romantic feelings for you. And that can be tough. Similar to how comp het dictates that femmes' only way to secure partnership is through a nuclear heterosexual relationship. I feel like a lot of the straights, or I'd say most folks, feel like the only way that you can truly be close to someone that they really care about is through a mutual romantic relationship, which brings us to another term. I'm sorry, y'all, there's a lot of terms, and it's getting a little bit deep, but the term is amatonormativity, which is the assumption that all human beings pursue love and romance, especially by means of a monogamous long-term relationship. The term was coined by Elizabeth Brake in her book Minimalizing Marriage, Marriage, Morality, and the Law. So the only reason why I went out of my way to include this is because I feel like both comp het and this experience of being curved by your first young love have a lot to do with how the patriarchal organization of how Western society operates can throw off our understanding of how close relationships or building partnerships can function. Put simply, we feel like we have limited options. Remember that. I feel like most humans want intimacy, not in bedroom playtime, but in feeling close to someone. And that can prove to be difficult, especially for queer people. Which brings us back to Good Luck Babe. and how this experience of being curved can feel like a betrayal. Because within those intimate friendships, we know so much about the person that we're spending so much time with. And with that exacerbated isolation of figuring out one's own queer identity, being close to someone who's also trying to figure that stuff out and having them not choose you or stand in their truth, only ending up to regret it, brings a level of legitimacy to all those confusing feels you might have felt back in those days. And that's personally why I feel like this song resonates so heavy. Basically in that it functions as Igor for white queers. So, with her cathartic play into the jilted lover trope, use of infectious 80s new wave and pop aesthetics of a, let's say, Cyndi Lauper or a Kate Bush, while writing songs that centered sapphic joy, loss, and messiness, it's understandable that she popped off while also kind of being too relatable for the club. Like, even though it's not my bag personally, the rise and fall of the Midwest Princess excels in its range, with all of the love, apprehension, and campy attitudes of a queer girl from a small town. An evolving theater baby who loves to be messy, enjoys partying, and stands in their queer identity. And as we discussed, she was everywhere. Her performances were on point and generally beloved by the masses, up until a few weeks ago, for a collection of baffling and understandable reasons. You see, within the midst of the calculated political chaos of this being an election year, while the liberal establishment participates in a killing spree in the Middle East, Chappell Roan stood on business, refusing to play the White House during Pride Month due to her frustration of the lack of mobilization within the Biden administration around their foreign policy, trans rights, and reproductive rights. And giving that opportunity up means a lot, because I'm pretty sure it was a solid check. She even used her platform to raise funds for reproductive health, stood up for herself when fans and paparazzi crossed her boundaries, and spoke about how rising to fame so fast affected her mental health. Pretty inoffensive and transparent behavior for a pop star, right? Well, now she's a fake lesbian. Let's dig into it.
You're losing me again.
No. This is not me playing both sides.
Sure about that?
I'm critiquing both sides because they're both so fucked up.
Yep, sounds like you're playing both sides.
Voting is all we have right now in the system.
I mean, that kind of is the system of democracy, but yeah, there's a lot more you could do in between elections.
I encourage it, yet again, vote for who, in your mind, is the best option for what we have.
Okay, so following by far the worst debate performance anyone's ever seen, President Joe Biden was forced to drop out of the presidential race.
Care system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if.
Outside of him being a disgusting war criminal and racist, a lot like his opponent, might I add.
Accurate in her criticism of Biden, who has a checkered history on racial justice, despite painting himself as a staunch civil rights advocate over the years. Perhaps one of the most criticized moments in Biden's past is his involvement in the creation of the notorious 1994 crime bill. People forget that the informal name for the bill was Biden's crime law. The legislation is widely criticized for being responsible for making the effects of mass incarceration in the US exponentially worse. Biden was also a key architect of the devastating Iraq War. Responsibility for the war is often blamed on George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, and other Republicans. But in reality, Biden played a key role as a Democrat. In the lead up to the war, Biden convened a series of Senate hearings to drum up support for the invasion on the basis of flimsy intelligence material being presented by the Republicans.
He was unable to adequately respond to the questions asked or stay on point. Him dropping out was a huge moment because it was a capitulation to the concerns of the people, which doesn't happen often. The DNC decided to go with Kamala Harris, igniting a very fervent rise in enthusiasm for the Democratic platform. With fear of Project 2025 rising, a conservative transitional project that seeks to eliminate reproductive rights, criminalize corn, enact mass deportation, discriminate against queer and trans folks, generally all the bad stuff that no one really wants. Folks saw the Harris-Walz ticket as the last bastion in the fight against full-throated US fascism. This kind of bothered me because it undermines a lot of things that have been happening politically, but that's a different video. I promise you this video is still about Chappell Roan. Anyways, Project 2025 is a proposal from the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank that popped off during the Reagan administration, which has an awful record of opposing just about all socially progressive policies. What's wild is that even though the Harris campaign has been hyper-focused on its Never Trump messaging, they're proudly touting endorsements from Heritage Foundation rock stars like Mickey Edwards, founding trustee of the Heritage Foundation, that seems to have shifted to a moderate Republican following the January 6 riots of 2020. And known war criminal everyone forgets is still alive, Dick Cheney. the architect of a 2-decade-long terror campaign in the Middle East, in which the United States relentlessly bombed, essayed, and occupied the region for oil. It still kind of does, by the way, but we'll get into that. So my main question is, if Project 2025 is such a threat to our democracy, and the Republicans are, by and large, attempting to move the freedom for many Americans, why are Democrats hyper-focused on reaching across the aisle and accepting Republicans into their movement? I think this has a lot to do with how flat and binary the American political conversation is. We, as its constituents, are presented with two choices consistently. The conservatives, on one hand, have been polishing and implementing Project 2025 like policy for about 60 years now, attacking on the congressional, state, and federal levels, accomplishing their goal with this multi-pronged strategy. While the Dems go out of their way to belittle and exercise progressive candidates, as well as capitulate to Republican framing around certain issues. It was crime in the 90s.
Gangs. Just as in a previous generation we had an organized effort against the mob. We need to take these people on. They are often connected to big drug cartels. They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel. And the president has asked the FBI to launch a very concerted effort against gangs everywhere.
Now it's immigration.
Here, Joe and I brought together Democrats and conservative Republicans to write the strongest border bill in decades. The Border Patrol endorsed it.
But why? Well, both sides are interested in holding up the same system. Democracy? No. Capitalism. The profit motive drives what gets done. And with that, they could care less about what the people need or want. Progressive candidates who challenge the system as it exists are ousted if they don't toe the party line. That's why the Dems always want to invite Republicans to the table, even though they constantly talk about how dangerous their ideas are. I could talk forever about the Overton window in political theory, but this has dragged on long enough. So what I'd like you to take away from this is, yes, definitely vote, but also understand that the Democrats use the threats and ideas of Republicans in order to fearmonger us for votes, while they do the bare minimum to actually protect us, which is why voting small is important. So when Chappell Roan spoke about frustration with both sides, I honestly felt that. And to be clear, it's a lot worse now.
Cafe's owner who was killed in the attack.
The missiles targeted a civilian building. A family was wiped from the civil registry. What was their fault? The family was asleep in their house. There's no safe place for the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people have the right to defend themselves.
Israel's military claimed the bombing targeted the head of Hamas's infrastructure in Tulkarm. It was the largest and deadliest airstrike in the occupied West Bank in more than 2 decades.
For a little over a year, many connected with the ongoings outside of the U.S. have witnessed a live-stream genocide on their phones. All of it only possible with United States tax dollars. Something about seeing children shredded, families wiped out, communities destroyed, etc. really lowers the level of enthusiasm one could have for the candidate who's openly supporting it. I think it's incredibly ignorant and insulting to tell Palestinians that Trump would be worse when their entire lives have been shattered.
Nobody can stop them. So yeah, we need your support in every mean you can.
Is there anything you want to specifically, like, is there anything that you feel hopeful about in all of this? Or does it, I mean, I know it's a hard thing to ask, especially considering, do you still have family members in Gaza?
Yeah, all my family there, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I lost around like 26 of my family, like 18 friends, but yeah, I still have more. I hope they survive this.
I know.
And as a human being, I cannot prioritize or rationalize a public endorsement of someone who feels like wiping out entire families to support their political ally is okay.
But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there.
Or what's worse, parrot misinformation to justify genocide.
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis, many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would.
And as we discussed here, there is a financial incentive for folks to ignore the suffering. And to be clear, this is not a conspiracy theory regarding Jewish people owning the media. Anti-Semitism in the West specifically is a very real issue. One felt in solidarity as a Black person who understands that anti-Semitism misogyny, queerphobia, racism are all core tenets of white supremacy. Israel, as it currently exists, is a settler colonial project buffered and sustained by the West, America and its allies, to undermine and spy on the Middle East, only to grow and expand Western power at the expense of the people living there, point blank. And let's not get it twisted. It's easy to see these things as separate issues away from American politics or interest. But when we're talking about capitalism as it exists as a death coat, it's easy to see all of these things as connected. Israel's deadly exchange program trains American police to brutalize and over-surveil Black and brown communities here, now culminating in multiple cop cities being built around the United States. The United States prioritizes huge tech companies that use child and slave labor in the Democratic Republic of the Congo to create computing devices, not only for profit and consumption, but also to surveil the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, or wherever else the imperial eye has its target on next. Our government would rather continue to bomb Palestinians and now its neighbors, causing irreversible damage to the planet, culminating in worse and worse natural disasters that hit both domestically and abroad, instead of using those funds to help the citizens affected by those disasters, with those disasters being caused by our inaction to do anything about climate change. Heavy stuff. So with all this happening, why do folks have more political smoke for a pop star instead of their own elected officials?
Did you miss me? Giddy up, giddy up, giddy up, giddy up. Ride 'em, cowboy. Oh, I forgot. You're broken. I don't want to play with you anymore.
I mean, the simple answer is a few things, but honestly, it starts with misogyny. Folks don't like it when a woman speaks out against the established wave. People are going full force for the Democrats, even though recently a lot of their policy positions have been pretty conservative. And this anti-intellectualism is mostly around folks who just don't want to think about politics anymore. And with that, they use any criticism of Kamala Harris as an opportunity to accuse folks of working for the Republicans. But Chappell Roan is special, mainly because queer representation outside of a few names is in short supply. That, coupled with the fact that Americans have a very consumptive attitude in regards to the art that we consume. And with that, Chappell Roan becomes a stand-in for the hopes, dreams, and values of her audience instead of a human being. What kind of sucks as a musician personally is that I feel like I exist as the backdrop for the audience's adventures. Like the art as it exists isn't a priority to engage with or listen to. It's a product. It's a service. Something that plays behind folks as they go through their own romantic comedy, individualistic adventures. Not saying that there's anything wrong with your life having a soundtrack or having fun at live shows and events, but as a person who does music labor, it feels like it's a very one-sided, consumptive affair. And I feel like this issue is even worse if you are a pop star. Like, yeah, I'm not saying that they're hyper-oppressed or shackled to the reality of fame with no rights or agency. But with the art being consumed through an individualistic lens, they are treated heavily as products with the misogyny, dehumanization, and other issues that come along with that. So when they transgress that and do something that their audience doesn't like, it's okay to discard them, berate them, harass them, and treat them as if they personally betrayed you. And this has a lot to do with how precious music is to us, but not in a discoursing, openly sharing kind of way, but as a way to feel seen, to validate our own individual experience, which leans back into the art as commodities concept that this channel seemingly is obsessed with now. But to bring it back around, pop stars who transgress the status quo at a time where people are eager to return back to it can make those audiences volatile and bring out their inner bootlicker, so to speak, meaning that they can discard an artist for saying the wrong thing, tone police them, infantilize them, and that's pretty shitty. But I'm gonna let her speak for herself, and I wish her peace.
I'm not picking the sides of what we have right now. Yes, one's obviously better than the other. But Jesus fucking Christ, I hope you don't settle for what we have and put your name behind someone that you don't fully trust because of their blatant actions.
That's all I have to say about this. If you'd like to help someone in Gaza, I have a GoFundMe that I'll link in the video description. If you could help out, that'd be great, or share it. Yes, vote small, vote local. Get involved in local organizations if you can. I know that both sides of the US system right now is pretty anti-immigrant. So if there are orgs that service immigrant communities in your neighborhood, please get involved. You could also never go wrong joining your local Food Not Bombs org. But with that, just do what you can. And thanks for watching. Peace.
Watch this video.
Israel is still poised to strike Iran, and in July, Blinken said that Iran was 1 to 2 weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. So I guess for all we know, they might have one by now. And meanwhile, in Ukraine, they've struck deep within Russian territory several times, as deep as 300 miles from the border. And in that case, we don't have to guess. We know that Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal on the planet, as many as 6,000 warheads. And so one of the risks of arming militaries that are striking in the territories of nuclear powers is that one of those gets deployed, and then it could escalate very quickly from there. So it's rarely discussed, but it's important to address that the nuclear risk is real, and it could very abruptly mean the end of what humans have worked for thousands of years to collectively achieve. And us today are very lucky to live with the fruits of that achievement, and I feel like we're treating the risk kind of brazenly. So my question for you is, we often hear in response to these concerns that, well, Putin, Khomeini, they're war criminals, they're terrorists, as if they're too inherently evil or immoral for us to negotiate with. But meanwhile, this administration has financed a genocide in Gaza for the last year, and every day you're up there denying accountability for it. So, what gives you the right to lecture other countries on their moral?
So if you have a policy question for me, I'm happy to take it. If you want to give a speech,
no, but I mean,
places in Washington where you can give a speech.
Yeah, but people are sick of the bullshit here. It is a genocide. You are risking nuclear war in Ukraine for this proxy war.
Places to give a speech. Go ahead.
Not